For much of its history, China's political regime is a monarchy led by a series of dynasties under a variety of ruling families. Ask anybody who's taken AP World with me in the last year and a half, and they can sing you a song about it. The only one that I will mention for our purposes today is called the Qin Dynasty, which may or may not have given its name to the English term China. The Qin Dynasty is the first to unify something that's recognizable as the modern state of China, and that happens more than 2,000 years ago. Since then, dynasties have risen and fallen. China has been in various states of unity and disunity, war and peace. But the idea of China has remained a constant for those 2+ millennia. Um, During the imperial period, from the Qin dynasty up until the beginning of the 20th century, there's a couple of key political ideas you need to know. The first is that one of the sources of legitimacy for most Chinese emperors is an old idea called the mandate of heaven. On the on one side, on the pro-emperor side, this is a really good thing if you hold political power, because it suggests that the reason the ruling family gets to wield power and wield coercive force is because heaven, which is a deity-like concept but not exactly a personalized god, has ordained that family and that emperor with the power to do so. Um, and so that can be used as a justification for tremendous power for the emperor and for people to exercise a lot of deference to the emperor. On the other hand, the mandate of heaven has also many times in Chinese history been used to justify the removal of an emperor or the overthrow of a dynasty on the grounds that if things are going poorly, if there are famines or floods or peasant rebellions, that's a sign that the emperor and the dynasty have lost the favor of heaven and that the mandate of heaven might transfer to somebody else who can do a better job. So, on the one hand, this idea legitimates a lot of authority for the people in charge. On the other hand, the same idea can be used to take that authority away. One other trend that develops in China's imperial history is a really extensive, really well organized, and really well established and politically and socially powerful bureaucracy. So, over the course of those 2,000 years, a variety of Chinese emperors contribute to establishing and expanding a system um, of in which people who work in the permanent service of the emperor and perhaps more importantly of the state have really high social status. It's a very competitive job. There is at various points in Chinese history, a pretty extensive civil service examination system that actually wouldn't be entirely unfamiliar to somebody who has suffered through the various tests administered by the College Board today. And so the bureaucracy establishes its position as a pretty privileged and a pretty important social class. You're going to see some continuity with that even after the 1949 establishment of communism in the People's Republic of China. Finally, one key philosophy that undergirds many Chinese dynasties in the imperial period is known as Confucianism, founded by a scholar, perhaps obviously known in the West as Confucius. Confucianism emphasizes the importance of establishing an orderly, stable society, and it says that the way to do that is to acknowledge that everybody has a different role in society, that role is defined by your position in an established hierarchy, and that people at different places in the hierarchy have a variety of roles and obligations that they need to fulfill. So, some interpretations of Confucianism, for instance, stress the importance of women obeying men. A woman, in some interpretations, is expected to obey during her life first her father, then her husband, and then when her husband dies, her oldest son. Similarly, if you work for the emperor, it's your moral obligation in Confucianism to keep society orderly by obeying the emperor and by obeying your superiors. So there's maybe a rigid or hierarchical understanding of how people should be placed in society and what individuals need to do in order to contribute to the social order. Confucianism, and particularly knowledge of key Confucian texts written both by Confucius and by subsequent scholars who interpreted his works, are the basis in late imperial China for the civil service examination system. So, your ability to move up in the world, your ability to enter that privileged class of the bureaucracy, your ability to secure a stable and good paying government job depends on your extensive study. Often for years and years in kind of sad isolation of those key Confucian texts and of the formats that are expected of you in the civil service exam.